The emergency session of the Galactic Federation had been called at dawn, but the decision was already made before the first delegate took their seat. 12 alien species sat in the Grand Chamber on Nexus Station, their faces showing the same mixture of fear and disgust that had been building for decades. At the center of the circular room, a holographic display showed the aftermath of the latest human conflict. Entire star systems burned, planets cracked open like eggs, and billions of lives lost in what humans called a police action. Ambassador Vec of the Altari delegation raised his forearms in the traditional gesture of condemnation. His people had suffered the most under human expansion, losing 3 colonies to what humans claimed were defensive operations. The scars on his blue-scaled face told the story of someone who had seen too much human warfare up close. "We cannot allow this madness to continue," he declared, his voice carrying across the chamber like thunder. "Humanity has proven they are incapable of peaceful coexistence. Every treaty we sign, they break. Every boundary we establish, they cross. They are a plague upon the galaxy." The Kalari representative, a tall insectoid creature with golden wings, clicked his mandibles in agreement. "Their ships multiply like parasites. Last month they had 50 vessels in the Outer Rim. This week our sensors count over 300. They breed conflict wherever they go." His compound eyes reflected the light from dozens of angles as he spoke, creating an unsettling kaleidoscope effect that somehow made his words more ominous. At the human embassy across the station, Ambassador Dale Reed paced in his office like a caged animal. The walls were lined with awards and medals from his 30-year diplomatic career, but today they felt more like tombstones marking the death of human-alien relations. His aide, a young woman named Beth Cole, watched him with worried eyes as reports flooded in from across human space. Federation ships were moving into position around every human system, not for protection but for containment. "Sir, we're getting word from Earth Command," Beth said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Admiral Turner wants to know if we should prepare for military action." The question hung in the air like poison gas. Both of them knew that military action against 12 united alien species would be suicide. No matter how advanced human weapons had become, Dale stopped pacing and looked out the viewport at the massive Federation fleet assembling beyond the station. Ships from a dozen different worlds floated in perfect formation, their alien designs creating a bizarre space ballet of fins, spines, and crystalline structures. Each vessel represented thousands of years of technological development, and together they formed the most powerful armada the galaxy had ever seen. "Tell the Admiral to stand down," he said finally. "We're outnumbered 100 to 1. Back in the Federation chamber, the vote was being called. One by one, each species cast their decision into the central holographic display. The Vorthak, masters of technology, voted for exile. The peaceful Deltarians, who had never fired a shot in anger, voted for exile. Even the warrior Krex, who respected human military prowess, voted for exile. When the final tally appeared, it was unanimous: humanity would be banished from the galactic community. The terms were simple and absolute. All human vessels had 72 hours to return to their home system. Any human ship found outside the soul barrier after that deadline would be destroyed without warning. All trade agreements were immediately terminated. All diplomatic channels would be permanently severed. Humanity would be alone in the universe, cut off from the galactic civilization they had tried so hard to join. Admiral Kate Morrison received the news while reviewing fleet deployments in her office on Luna. The moon's surface stretched out beyond her window, scarred with human industry and determination. Mining operations, weapons factories, and shipyards covered the ancient craters like metallic fungus. She had spent her entire career preparing humanity for the wars that everyone knew were coming, but she had never imagined this scenario. Not defeat in battle, but exile through politics. Her communication officer, Lieutenant Roy Banks, stood at attention beside her desk. His uniform was crisp and his posture perfect, but his eyes showed the same shock that was spreading across human space like wildfire. "Ma'am, we have confirmation from all sectors. Federation fleets are in position around our borders. They're not making threats, they're making promises. Kate turned from the window and looked at the star charts covering her office walls. Red pins marked human colonies, blue pins showed alien territories, and green lines indicated trade routes that had taken decades to establish. All of it was about to become meaningless. "How many ships can we get back to Seoul in 72 hours?" she asked. "Maybe 60% of the fleet if we abandon everything and run," Roy replied. "The outer colonies won't make it. Neither will our deep space exploration vessels." The implications were clear: thousands of human ships and millions of human lives would be trapped outside the barrier when it came down. As news of the exile spread across human space, reactions varied from panic to rage to something darker. On Earth, riots broke out in major cities as people demanded military action against the Federation. On Mars, colonial leaders called for immediate independence from Earth government. In the asteroid belt, mining crews began discussing something that sounded suspiciously like piracy, but in the quiet research facilities scattered across the outer planets, a different kind of reaction was taking shape. Scientists who had been studying alien technology for decades suddenly found themselves with a new purpose. If humanity was going to be cut off from galactic civilization, they would need to develop their own path forward. Dr. Emma Cross, working in a laboratory buried deep beneath Europa's ice, stared at equations that had been theoretical just hours ago. Now they might be humanity's only hope for survival. The 72-hour deadline passed like a death sentence. Federation ships powered up their weapons and began patrolling the invisible barrier that now surrounded human space. On the other side, the last human vessels limped home carrying refugees, broken dreams, and a burning desire for revenge that would smolder for centuries. The galaxy celebrated its successful containment of the human problem, not knowing they had just created something far more dangerous than they could possibly imagine. In their isolation, humanity would not wither and die as expected. Instead, they would transform into something the galaxy had never seen before, something that would one day return to claim not just their place among the stars, but dominion over all of them. 200 years had passed since the Federation barrier had come down around Seoul, and the galaxy had almost forgotten humanity existed. Trade routes that once connected human colonies to alien markets had been rerouted through other systems. Diplomatic archives stored the human files in sections marked historical curiosities. The few alien scholars who still studied humanity wrote papers about failed species, integration, and the dangers of rapid technological advancement without proper cultural development. In the research halls of Kepler University on the Vorthak homeworld, Professor Zeth gave the same lecture he had delivered for decades. His students, young Vorthak with their characteristic silver skin and multiple eyes, listened with mild interest as he described the human experiment in galactic integration. They were aggressive, unpredictable, and ultimately self-destructive, he explained, manipulating a holographic display that showed human expansion patterns. Their exile was unfortunate but necessary. By now, they have likely devolved into scattered tribes fighting over the scraps of their former civilization. What Professor Zeth and the rest of the galaxy did not know was that behind the Federation barrier, humanity had been transforming itself in ways that would have horrified their former neighbors. The enforced isolation had not broken human spirit. It had concentrated it into something pure and terrible. On Europa, Dr. Emma Cross had aged into humanity's leading expert on quantum mechanics, but her appearance would have shocked anyone who remembered her from the exile days. Her hair had gone completely white from decades of working with exotic radiation, and her eyes held a calculating coldness that came from spending lifetimes solving impossible problems. The laboratory she directed had grown from a small research facility into a vast complex that honeycombed the entire moon. The breakthrough had come during her third decade of isolation. While alien species relied on traditional faster-than-light drives that bent space around their ships, Emma had discovered something far more revolutionary. Instead of bending space, her quantum-fold drives could fold reality itself, allowing ships to step between dimensions and emerge anywhere in the universe instantly. The mathematics were so complex that only human minds seemed capable of grasping them. Alien brains, evolved for cooperation and stability, could not make the necessary logical leaps. Military development had proceeded along equally revolutionary lines. General Tom Hayes commanded the colonial defense forces from a massive space station hidden in Saturn's rings, where human military doctrine had evolved far beyond anything the galaxy had seen. The old human tendency toward aggressive expansion had been refined into something much more dangerous, patient. Methodical planning combined with overwhelming tactical superiority. Tom reviewed the latest training reports while walking through the station's central command deck. His officers moved with mechanical precision, their uniforms bearing no decorations or signs of individuality. After 2 centuries of isolation, humanity had developed a military culture that prioritized efficiency. Above all else, status report on Project Hammer, he commanded. Colonel Rita Stone, his chief of staff, consulted her datapad without expression. All production targets met. We now have active construction on 47 different ship classes, from patrol vessels to planet crackers. The new crews are graduating from the academies at twice our projected rate. She paused, reviewing additional data. Intelligence estimates we could field a 1,000-ship fleet within 18 months if necessary. But the most significant development was occurring in the asteroid belt, where mining operations had uncovered something that would change everything. The discovery had been accidental. A routine excavation on a minor asteroid had broken through into a chamber filled with crystalline structures that defied all known physics. These crystals, which human scientists dubbed reality cores, could be synthesized in massive quantities using techniques that seemed to violate conservation of energy. Director Wayne Foster oversaw the industrial complexes that now covered hundreds of asteroids, each one producing exotic matter on a scale that would have powered entire alien civilizations. His workers, humans adapted for zero-gravity life through genetic modification, had become something new, a specialized caste designed specifically for space-based industry. Production is up 12% this quarter, he reported during his monthly briefing to Earth Command. We can now outfit a full battle fleet with reality core weapon systems in under 6 months. On Earth itself, the transformation was even more dramatic. The blue-green world that aliens remembered had been converted into a fortress planet, its surface covered with military academies, research facilities, and the massive shipyards that would soon unleash humanity upon an unsuspecting galaxy. Cities had been rebuilt according to purely functional designs, with no consideration for aesthetics or comfort. Every human child born during the exile years was raised from birth to serve the greater purpose of eventual galactic conquest. Admiral James Carter, now Supreme Commander of all human forces, stood in the war room beneath Geneva and studied holographic displays that showed the current state of Federation space. Alien patrol routes, fleet concentrations, industrial capacity, population centers. Every detail had been cataloged by human intelligence services that had never stopped operating despite the embargo. "Initiate Phase 1, he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 2 centuries preparing for this moment. The preparations were finally complete. Human shipyards began working around the clock, producing vessels that incorporated every lesson learned during their isolation. These ships were not just technologically superior to anything in Federation space. They were built by a species that had been forged in the fires of abandonment and emerged as something harder and more focused than they had ever been before. Dr. Emma Cross made her final calculations in the Europa laboratory where it had all begun. The quantum fold drives were ready. The reality core weapons had been tested and perfected. The military had trained a generation of officers who knew nothing but preparation for war. Most importantly, humanity had learned the one lesson that would make their eventual victory inevitable. They had learned to think as one species with one purpose. As the 3rd century of exile drew to a close, long-range sensors detected massive energy buildups throughout human space. For the first time in 300 years, something was stirring behind the Federation barrier. The galaxy was about to rediscover why humanity had been considered dangerous enough to exile in the first place, and they were going to learn that. 3 centuries of isolation had not weakened the human spirit. It had weaponized it into something the universe had never seen before. The Federation early warning system had been the pride of galactic civilization for over 2 centuries, its sensors capable of detecting ships from 3-star systems away. That morning, Operator Yeth sat at his monitoring station on Nexus Prime, sipping his traditional morning beverage, while watching the peaceful green dots that represented merchant traffic throughout Federation space. His shift had been quiet for months. The galaxy had grown comfortable in its peace, and most Federation worlds no longer even maintained active military patrols. The first anomaly appeared at exactly 847 Galactic Standard Time. Yeth blinked his large compound eyes and leaned closer to his screen, wondering if his equipment was malfunctioning. The sensors were detecting massive energy signatures at 12 different locations simultaneously, each one registering power levels that should have been impossible for any known technology. "Supervisor Kren," he called, his voice carrying a note of confusion rather than alarm. "I'm getting some strange readings." Supervisor Kren approached with the unhurried pace of someone who had been dealing with sensor glitches for 30 years. His purple skin had the weathered look of a career Federation officer, and his 6 arms moved with practiced efficiency as he began running diagnostics on Yeth's equipment. "Probably solar interference from the Rigel system," he muttered, checking. "Connection cables. These old sensors are always acting up during stellar maximum periods." Then the contacts appeared. 12 massive fleets materialized simultaneously in the space around major Federation worlds, their dark ships emerging from what looked like tiers in reality itself. Each vessel was larger than anything in the Federation databases, and they moved with a coordination that suggested central control across impossible distances. The ships themselves were angular and predatory, built from metals that absorbed scanner beams rather than reflecting them. Admiral Sarah Knox commanded the lead vessel from a bridge that would have terrified any alien observer. The command center was stark and functional, with no decorations or comfortable seating, just efficiency and purpose. Her crew operated their stations with mechanical precision, their movements synchronized like parts of a single machine. Through the view screen, the planet Centauri Prime grew larger, its orbital defense platforms already scrambling to respond to the sudden appearance of the human fleet. "Signal from Centauri Defense Command," reported Communications Officer Roy Banks. His voice carried no emotion. Human military doctrine had evolved beyond the need for excitement or fear during combat operations. "They're demanding identification and ordering us to withdraw to minimum safe distance." Sarah studied the tactical displays that showed Federation ship movements throughout the system. Their response was predictable, multiple species trying to coordinate a defense using different technologies and communication protocols. It would be like watching children play at war. "Open a channel to all Federation forces in this system," she commanded. The transmission went out on all frequencies, carrying a message that would echo throughout galactic history. "Federation vessels, this is Admiral Sarah Knox of the Terran. Hegemony, we are reclaiming this system for humanity. You have one opportunity to withdraw your forces and avoid unnecessary casualties. You have 5 minutes to begin your retreat." On Centauri Prime, General Vec of the Altari Defense Forces watched the human fleet through the tactical displays in his command bunker. His blue-scaled hands trembled slightly as he counted the enormous ships that had appeared without warning in his system. 300 years ago, his grandfather had voted to exile humanity from galactic space. Now they had returned with technology that seemed to ignore the basic laws of physics. "Sir, we have 43 Federation ships in system," his aide reported. "Combined fleet strength from 6 different species. The humans only have 12 vessels, but their energy signatures are off the charts." The young Altari officer looked confused. "Our computers can't even classify what type of weapons they're carrying." General Vec had studied human military history during his academy years, back when such knowledge was considered a historical curiosity. He remembered the old reports about human tactics, aggressive, unpredictable, willing to accept massive casualties to achieve victory. But the fleet hanging in space above his world showed none of that chaotic energy. These ships moved with the patience of predators, who knew their prey could not escape. The 5-minute deadline passed without any Federation withdrawals. Sarah Knox gave the order that would reshape galactic civilization. All ships, commence. Attack pattern Alpha. Demonstrate why the Federation was right to fear us. The Battle of Centauri Prime lasted exactly 18 minutes. Human ships began folding space around themselves, appearing and disappearing across the battlefield faster than Federation sensors could track. Their weapons fired beams of exotic matter that passed through Federation shields like they did not exist, tearing apart ship hulls at the molecular level. The combined fleet of 6 alien species, representing the most advanced military technology in known space, was annihilated without managing to inflict significant damage on a single human vessel. The most shocking aspect was not the technological superiority, but the clinical efficiency with which humans conducted the battle. There were no demands for surrender, no attempts to minimize casualties, no hesitation when Federation ships tried to flee. Human tactical doctrine had evolved beyond such considerations during their centuries of isolation. Victory was the only acceptable outcome, and anything that stood in the way of victory was simply removed, Captain Lisa Reed commanded. The human assault on the Deltarian homeworld from the bridge of the destroyer Vengeance. Her target was not a military installation but the planetary capital itself, a beautiful city of crystal spires that had taken the peaceful Deltarians centuries to build. Target acquired, her weapons officer reported. Reality bombs ready for deployment. Fire, Lisa commanded without hesitation. The reality bombs were humanity's most terrifying weapon devices that could unmake matter at the quantum level, causing entire structures to simply cease existing. The Deltarian capital, home to 12 million aliens, vanished in a flash of light that could be seen from orbit. In its place was a perfectly spherical crater that glowed with residual quantum energy. News of humanity's return spread across Federation space faster than their fleets could follow. On every world, the same scene played out, panicked government officials trying to understand how their sensors had failed so completely, military commanders realizing that their weapons were useless against human technology and civilian populations, beginning to grasp that their 3 centuries of peace were over. At the Federation capital, emergency sessions convened around the clock as reports flooded in from every corner of their territory. Ambassador Thek, now ancient and barely able to stand, listened to the tactical briefings with growing horror. The species that had been contained for 300 years had returned with capabilities that seemed to mock everything the Federation thought they knew about technology and warfare. "How many systems have they taken?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "All of them," came the reply from a young aide whose scales had turned pale with shock. "Every major Federation world is under human control. Their fleets are establishing occupation zones and demanding unconditional surrender from all local authorities." The age of Federation dominance was over. Humanity had returned to galactic civilization not as supplicants seeking readmission, but as conquerors claiming their rightful place as masters of the stars. The exile that was meant to contain them had instead forged them into something the galaxy had never seen, a unified, technologically superior species with 3 centuries of patience finally unleashed upon their former neighbors. The transformation of galactic civilization began with paperwork. On every conquered world, human administrators arrived within days of military occupation, carrying data tablets and orbital deployment orders that would reshape centuries of alien culture. They worked with the same mechanical efficiency that characterized all human endeavors, processing entire planetary populations like industrial resources to be cataloged and optimized to Director. And Foster established her headquarters in what had once been the Federation Council. Chambers on Nexus Prime, the Grand Hall where 12 alien species had once debated galactic policy, was now filled with human bureaucrats working at simple metal desks, processing forms that determined the Fate of billions of sentient beings. The ornate decorations had been removed and replaced with functional lighting that cast everything in harsh white illumination. Classification report for the Vortex species, announced her chief statistician, a thin man named Paul Gray who had spent his career analyzing population data. His voice carried no emotion as he reduced an entire civilization to numbers on a spreadsheet. Total population approximately 4 billion. Primary skills include advanced mathematics, computer programming, and theoretical physics. Recommendation: classify as useful with restricted autonomy on their homeworld. And reviewed the data without looking up from her tablet. During the exile years, human society had evolved beyond concepts like cultural sensitivity or individual rights. Every decision was made based on practical utility to the growing Terran hegemony. Approved. What's the status on the Deltarian? Survivors? Remaining population scattered across 14 refugee camps on border worlds. Skills include agriculture, artistic creation, and diplomatic mediation. No significant military or industrial capabilities. Poll consulted additional data before continuing. Recommendation: classify as manageable. Relocate to agricultural worlds in Sector 7 where they can contribute to food production. The classification system that emerged from these sessions divided all non-human species into 3 categories. The useful species retained some degree of self-governance in exchange for contributing their specialized knowledge to human projects. The manageable species were relocated to worlds where they could live peacefully under human supervision. The problematic species faced a much harsher fate. Colonel Robert Hayes oversaw the resettlement operations from his command ship in orbit above the Altari homeworld. The same species that had voted for human exile 3 centuries ago now found themselves boarding transport vessels bound for mining colonies in the Outer Rim. Their blue-scaled faces showed a mixture of fear and resignation as human soldiers directed them with impersonal efficiency toward cargo holds that had been hastily converted for passenger transport. "Sir, we have the final count from the surface," reported his logistics officer, a young woman whose uniform bore no decorations or personal insignia. Approximately 200 million Altari ready for transport to the designated mining worlds. Their government officials are requesting permission to address the population before departure. Robert watched the loading procedures through his office viewport, noting how smoothly the operation proceeded despite its massive scale. Human military doctrine had evolved far beyond the chaotic expansion methods of their ancestors. Every action was calculated for maximum efficiency with minimum waste of resources. Permission denied. Former government officials are classified as problematic leadership elements. They'll be processed separately. What made human rule so effective was not just their technological superiority, but their complete disregard for alien concepts of rights or cultural preservation. The humans who had emerged from 3 centuries of isolation viewed galactic civilization as a collection of resources to be optimized rather than a community of equals to be negotiated with. Every world was evaluated solely on its contribution to human objectives. President Michael Torres governed the expanding Terran hegemony from his office in Geneva, where Earth's military leadership had been making decisions for the entire human species since the early days of exile. The blue marble that hung in space beyond his window now served as the administrative center for a territory spanning hundreds of star systems, each one contributing to humanity's growing power. "Status report on industrial conversion," he requested. During his morning briefing, his cabinet consisted entirely of humans who had been born and raised during the isolation years, their minds shaped by generations of preparation for this moment. Cultural diversity or individual expression were concepts they understood only as historical curiosities. Secretary of Colonial Affairs Beth Morgan consulted her reports with the same mechanical precision that characterized all human officials. Conversion proceeding ahead of schedule on all occupied worlds. Former Federation shipyards are being retooled for human vessel production. Mining operations have increased output by 300% under direct human management. Agricultural worlds are exceeding food production targets. The efficiency gains came from eliminating what humans viewed as wasteful alien practices. The Federation's complex web of cultural protections, environmental regulations, and workers' rights had been replaced by simple directives focused on productivity. Alien workers were assigned tasks based on biological capabilities rather than personal preferences. Environmental concerns were evaluated solely on their impact to industrial output on the former Federation capital world. Ambassador Dale Reed walked through the empty corridors of what had once been the Galactic Diplomatic Center. The grand chambers where alien species had spent centuries crafting careful compromises and cultural exchanges now stood silent, their purpose obsolete in a galaxy ruled by human pragmatism. His footsteps echoed off walls that had been stripped of their alien artwork and decorative elements. The few alien species that still maintained diplomatic functions found themselves operating under completely different rules. Human negotiation. Tactics eliminated the elaborate courtesy rituals and cultural considerations that had defined Federation diplomacy. Agreements were simple documents focused on resource allocation and productivity quotas. There were no provisions for cultural autonomy or species-specific accommodation. The Kalari delegation is requesting a meeting about working conditions in the orbital factories, his aide informed him. The young diplomat had been trained in the new protocols that treated alien requests as purely administrative matters rather than diplomatic negotiations. Dale reviewed the request without interest. The insectoid Kalari had been classified as useful due to their natural ability to work in zero-gravity environments, but their biological needs were considered secondary to production requirements. Schedule them for a 15-minute meeting. Next week, prepare the standard response about productivity targets taking priority over comfort considerations. What shocked the galaxy most was how quickly their children adapted to the new order. Young aliens who had never known Federation rule accepted human authority as natural and normal. Schools throughout former Federation space taught human languages, human history, and human values. Within a single generation, alien cultures that had developed over millennia were being absorbed into a homogeneous galactic civilization designed around human preferences. The process was not violent. Violence was inefficient. Instead, it was systematic and inexorable, like a machine that converted diverse inputs into standardized outputs. Alien languages were gradually replaced by simplified versions of human tongues. Traditional cultural practices were discontinued if they interfered with work schedules. Religious beliefs were tolerated only if they encouraged productivity and obedience to human authority. General Patricia Stone completed her inspection tour of the Outer Rim colonies, where former Federation species now labored in conditions that would have horrified their ancestors. The mining operations, industrial facilities, and agricultural complexes hummed with activity as billions of alien workers contributed to humanity's expanding power. Their efficiency levels exceeded anything the Federation had achieved during its centuries of existence. Standing on the observation deck of her command ship, she watched cargo vessels carrying exotic matter and rare minerals toward human space. Each ship represented the conversion of alien labor into human power, the transformation of galactic diversity into unified purpose. The stars themselves now served human ambitions, and every world in Federation space had become a component in humanity's galactic machine. The 5th anniversary of human conquest arrived without fanfare or celebration. Such concepts had become irrelevant in a galaxy where every action served the greater purpose of maintaining human dominance. In the massive orbital shipyards that now surrounded every major world, construction never stopped. The sound of metal on metal, the hiss of welding torches, and the steady hum of industrial machinery had become the background music of galactic civilization. Fleet. Admiral David Park supervised the latest production statistics from his office. Aboard Titan Station, the largest artificial structure ever built, the space platform stretched for hundreds of kilometers through Saturn's rings, its surface bristling with construction bays, weapons testing facilities, and docking ports for the endless stream of vessels that maintained human control over their conquered territory. Through his observation windows, Newly completed ships emerged from the construction bays like mechanical offspring, each one adding to humanity's already overwhelming naval superiority. Production report for this quarter, his chief engineer announced, consulting data streams that flowed across multiple display screens. Commander Rita Fox had been born in the asteroid mining colonies during the exile years, her childhood spent in zero gravity among the industrial complexes that had forged humanity's transformation. We've completed construction on 47 heavy cruisers, 112 destroyers, and 18 planet-class siege vessels. The new quantum-fold drives are being installed ahead of schedule. David reviewed the numbers with satisfaction. The shipyards no longer built vessels for exploration or trade. Every ship that emerged from human construction facilities was designed for a single purpose: maintaining absolute control over the galaxy through overwhelming force. The alien species that had once voted to exile humanity now existed solely to support the industrial infrastructure that kept them enslaved. The efficiency of the system was remarkable. On agricultural worlds throughout the former Federation space, alien farmers worked fields that had been reorganized according to human agricultural science. Their crops fed not their own populations, but the human colonies and military installations that had become the galaxy's new ruling class. The complex trade relationships that had defined Federation economics for centuries had been replaced by simple resource extraction flowing toward human space. Director Wayne Foster walked through the processing centers on Kepler Prime, where millions of tons of exotic matter were refined every day by workers who had once been proud citizens of independent worlds. The Vorthek technicians operated the machinery with mechanical precision, their silver skin adapted to the harsh lighting of the industrial facilities. They worked 18-hour shifts without complaint, their children educated in human-run schools, where they learned that serving Earth was the highest possible achievement for any sentient being. Output is up another 8%, Wayne noted, reviewing production logs on his portable data unit. The former Federation capital had been converted into a massive refinery complex, its beautiful crystal spires replaced by functional towers that processed raw materials from across the galaxy. The new generation of workers is significantly more efficient than their parents. They don't waste time on cultural activities or personal relationships. This was perhaps humanity's greatest achievement, not just the conquest of galactic civilization, but its complete transformation into something that served human purposes. The children of conquered species grew up speaking human languages, thinking human thoughts, and dreaming human dreams. They competed for the privilege of serving in human institutions, viewing assignment to Earth itself as the ultimate honor. General Patricia Stone reviewed the latest intelligence reports from her command center deep beneath Europa's ice, the same moon where humanity's technological revolution had begun, now served as the nerve center for maintaining control over hundreds of billions of alien subjects. Her staff worked around the clock monitoring every aspect of galactic civilization, ensuring that no corner of former Federation space could develop independent thoughts or capabilities. Any signs of resistance movements? She asked her intelligence chief, a man whose entire career had been spent cataloging and eliminating threats to human authority. The question was routine, asked every day for 5 years, with the same answer. Becoming increasingly predictable. Negative, General. The few remaining resistance cells were eliminated last month on the Outer Rim mining worlds. Current intelligence indicates complete acceptance of human authority across all occupied systems. The officer consulted additional data before continuing. The new generation of alien subjects shows no interest in independence or cultural restoration. They appear to be fully integrated into the hegemony structure. This psychological transformation represented humanity's most sophisticated weapon. Unlike their ancestors who had conquered through force and maintained control through fear, the humans who emerged from exile had learned to conquer minds as well as territories. They had created a galactic civilization where rebellion was not just impossible, but literally unthinkable to most subjects. On Earth itself, the transformation was equally complete, but in the opposite direction. The blue-green world had been converted into a fortress planet, its surface covered with military academies, research facilities, and the government complexes that administered galactic civilization. Human children grew up understanding that they were the inheritors of the galaxy, destined to rule over the alien species that their ancestors had been forced to exile. President Michael Torres addressed the Human Colonial Assembly from the Great Hall in Geneva, where representatives from across the galaxy gathered to receive their instructions for the coming year. His audience consisted entirely of humans. Alien species were no longer considered capable of participating in governance at any level. The concept of representation had been replaced by administration, with efficiency as the only meaningful measure of success. 5 years ago, we returned to claim our rightful place among the stars, he declared, his voice carrying to human settlements across hundreds of worlds. Today, we have achieved something greater than our ancestors ever imagined. We have not merely conquered the galaxy, we have perfected it. The statistics supported his claim. Industrial output had increased by over 400% under human management. Interstellar transportation operated with clockwork precision. Crime, inefficiency, and cultural conflict had been eliminated through the simple expedient of removing their causes. The chaotic diversity that had characterized Federation civilization had been replaced by unified purpose directed toward human objectives, but perhaps the most significant achievement was philosophical rather than practical. Humanity had proven that their exile had not been a punishment but a gift. The 3 centuries of isolation had forged them into something that no other species could have become, a unified consciousness capable of thinking and acting on a galactic scale. They had transformed rejection into dominance, abandonment into absolute authority. Dr. Emma Cross, now ancient but still sharp, stood in her laboratory on Europa and studied the quantum equations that had made human conquest possible. The walls around her were covered with calculations that had taken her lifetime to develop, but their practical application had reshaped the entire galaxy. Through the laboratory windows, she could see the lights of orbital facilities that processed resources. From 1,000 worlds, the galaxy had tried to cage humanity, to contain their aggressive expansion and unpredictable nature. Instead, they had created the conditions that allowed humans to evolve beyond the limitations that constrained other species. The exile had stripped away everything that made humanity weak: their tendency toward internal conflict, their attachment to inefficient cultural practices, their willingness to compromise with alien perspectives. What emerged from that isolation was something the galaxy had never seen before: a species that thought as one mind, acted with perfect coordination, and pursued objectives across timescales that individual aliens could not comprehend. The Federation had created their own conquerors through the very act of trying to contain them. Now the stars themselves bent to human will, and every world in galactic space existed solely to serve the species that had been exiled and ignored. The iron grip that humanity maintained over their conquered territory would never loosen, because they had learned the most important lesson of all, that true power came not from being accepted by the galaxy, but from making the galaxy accept them as its undisputed masters.